So we continue our somewhat non-traditional journey through the prophets this week, and we've been having a good time. I've been having a good time with all of the different places and things we get to see, and sort of alternative voices in the history of the kings. And this morning, I want to sort of back away from that a little bit and go back to the kings. If you were here a few weeks ago, or if you watched online and you have the app and you said, oh, there's a new sermon video posted on the app, and so you looked at that, P.S. download the app. If you did that, you would have heard let's really rip into the kings, right? So what happens is Moses brings this alternative voice and life to this community of people that say, we live outside, we live under God's rule, we live outside of this kingdom mentality where oppression and expectations are built around wealth and privilege. And then the kings show up, and Israel calls for a kingdom that does exactly what Moses helped pull them out of. It does exactly what they were supposed to be providing an alternative voice to. And so this morning, I want to look at the kings a little bit more and just find that alternative voice within the non-alternative setting of kings. So here's what's happening theologically in the kings. We're just going to dig right in because it's fun, okay? So the kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, give us a picture, an image of what a good king is supposed to be and what a bad king is supposed to be. What religious life is supposed to look like. And all of those things that we've been talking about, the prophets that stand up to the kings and tell them, by the way, you're supposed to be practicing and living out your faith not at the temple or not at the sacrificial space, but instead in the marketplace and in your daily life and how you treat people and how you live within your family. All of those voices are mostly closed in the books of the kings. And the good thing that a king can do is practice religion properly. And it's fun to watch. You just read through it and you see them describe this king and the next king. And this king did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And then the follow-up statement is, by worshiping where they were supposed to worship. And this king did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And the follow-up statement is, because they didn't worship how they were supposed to. This is part of the king's understanding of religion and theology. But what happens in this process is that every once in a while, even within that context, we see an alternative voice, and this is what we're seeking, is that alternative voice within the culture, within the society that says, you can still step outside of where you are and what you're doing to be called back to your roots. So there is always, this is what's fun about the text, it doesn't matter where you look, you find these alternative voices that have survived all kinds of edits and expectations and who they're supposed to be and stuff like that. So that's the reality of the kings. The kings present this reality that wealth and privilege is part of what God is providing to them. That wealth and privilege is part of what religion is supposed to look like. And so everything is geared toward that way. And let's set the stage here because we're going to look at some of these expectations. Remember, Israel is built on this understanding that they are unique. We do this too. We tell our own story about how we are unique, maybe as a church, maybe as a faith group of Christianity, maybe as a culture of North Americans. If you're in the U.S., you're definitely living under an identity that you are unique. But we do this even individualistically. It's part of, what buzzword should we put here? Postmodernism or millennials or something. It's part of our culture to say, each one of us are unique and an individual and live how we want to live and whatever. We're all artists and different things like this. But the reality is that Israel lived under this understanding in their faith journey. They live with this promise that had been given to Abraham that we are this chosen kingdom that will rise up and God is going to put in place. And when David comes to power, everything makes sense in this world. Everything is put together. The world is where it's supposed to be. God has put the kingdom in place that's supposed to be where it is. The right people are in charge and the wrong people have been smited. Everything falls into place, right? But little by little, this begins to change as the cultures and people around them change. And that's some of the story of the kings. And what we see is little by little, Israel is threatened. There's two kingdoms here. I know we've done this, but we got to keep doing it. There's two kingdoms here. There's Israel and then Judah below it. They worship differently. They have slightly different ideologies in how they think about the world. The prophets are either speaking to Judah or to Israel. Sometimes they're coming from Judah. This is a very political move. And they're going into Israel to tell them how they're supposed to live, right? It's fun. And so as things change, first thing that happens that puts a crack in who Israel is that Assyria in 722 overtakes Israel and begins deporting people and changing the landscape. So from there, the kings tell the story of Judah's kings. And there's this glimmer of hope left in Judah. Now we know at some point that's going to fall too. And everything that they've built up theologically about who God is and what God is supposed to be doing falls. All of your expectations are dashed in that moment when Israel and then Judah falls. Yet, they continue with the expectation that God is going to replace the kingdom with a physical kingdom. More on that later. Just keep that in the back of your head. So here's where we are. So we're going to look at Josiah today. You can open up to 2 Kings 22, if you like. And I'll find my Bible. Yesterday, we had a service here yesterday, and somebody came looking for a Bible. We didn't have a Bible. It was like, we have a teen Bible. Does that work? It was funny. Okay, 2 Kings 22. So here's the setting. Josiah is going to be one of these great kings that follows in the line of David. He's going to be a good guy. He's going to be one of the few that we can look up to and later write about and say, now Josiah was a good king and he did right in the eyes of the Lord. And here's what happens during Josiah's reign. During Josiah's reign, they discover in cleaning out the house of the Lord, they discover the law code. Now, it's unclear exactly what this is, but we think it's a portion of Deuteronomy. It's unclear when it was actually written. We think it was written during, there's even speculation that this priest, Hilkiah, actually writes it and then presents it to the king. Like, look at this ancient book I found. Like, we're very familiar with these kinds of crazy ideas. Anyway, so in the 18th year of King Josiah, the king sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, son of Meshullam. This is all necessary information. The secretary to the house of the Lord, saying, go up to the high priest Hilkiah and have him count the entire sum of money that has been brought to the house of the Lord, to keepers of the threshold. And in the process, they discover, he comes back and he says, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And when Hilkiah gave the book of the law to Shaphan, he read it. And he said, this has to be known to the king. And so he goes and takes it to the king. And now all of them, and this is where we get to this prophetic voice, all of them say, okay, we've got to go see the prophet Huldah. We have to go see the prophet or prophetess Huldah. And this is why we're reading this story today. Because here, just in this tiny little story, in the midst of this expanse of kings that come and go and fall and are risen and are brought to their knees and are killed with all kinds of random things, in the midst of this, we have an alternative voice in this highly driven patriarchal society. The high priest, the king, one of the king's top advisors says we have to go see the prophetess Huldah, the wife of Shalom, son of Tikva, son of Haras. Here we're even when we're talking about Huldah, we're hearing all of her male ancestors and connections. And Ahikam, son of Sheph, and Akbor, son of and the king's servant Asaiah, saying, "Go inquire of the Lord for me, for the people, and for all of Judah concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our ancestors did not obey the words of this book, to do according to all that is written concerning us." So here in the midst of this story is this nice little, almost passable moment that you don't even catch, where an alternative world is viewed, just in this single moment where we see this prophetess Huldah being consulted. Now she's going to give them the same theology that the Kings is writing about. It all falls in line with the greater societal expectations and understanding of the world. But she herself stands out as an alternative voice to the broader picture. And even in the story of Josiah, so here's what happens next. She's going to we should read her words. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me," that's the king, "Thus says the Lord, I will indeed bring disaster on this place and on its inhabitants. All the words of the book that the king of Judah has read, because they have abandoned me and have made offerings to other gods." That's the bit of King's theology. "Therefore my wrath will be kindled against this place, and it will not be quenched. But as to the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you shall say to him, the God of Israel, regarding the words you have heard. Because your heart was penitent, and you humbled yourself before the Lord, you have heard how I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants. You should become a desolation and a curse, and because you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I have heard you. I have heard you, and I have heard your cry." And she goes on to say, "And you will die in peace of old age." That doesn't happen, but that's beside the point. Here's what's great about this story, is that in the midst of the full-blown kingdom theology and expectations, this alternative voice gives an image of the other speaking out and speaking up. And what Josiah does next, and this is also missed in our lack of history, and like a rabbi wouldn't miss this. Like if you're reading it in the day, you wouldn't miss this. Israel has already fallen. Assyria is gone. And what happens next is Josiah begins reforming all of the kingdom. But he also goes into Assyria. And they just name some locations. There's not a big point of this made, but he goes into Assyria, which was Israel, to tell them to reform their stuff too. It is a prophetic voice when he does this. It's a prophetic action to say the Davidic kingdom, the God of David, is going to return this. Eventually, he stands up against Assyria somehow, and he ends up in a fight with Egypt, and Egypt kills him. Probably an assassination. It's unclear. Anyway, the prophetess didn't really give us the right expectation there. But here's in the midst of this kingdom theology, in the midst of everything that was against the culture of Moses, the expectation and the voice that comes is still this small moment of a prophetic voice right in the midst of things. And that's what I want to talk about today in terms of how we see our own prophetic voice. You see, sometimes when we talk about the prophetic voice, we want to talk about, there's a big speaker author that lives in a commune. So you're thinking cult, but it's just trying to live out what the early church was doing, like living in community. It's a brilliant idea. It's very lovely. You share what you have. You live in this space, and it's very countercultural. It hits all the right buzzwords. But we can't all do that, or we're not all going to do that, right? And so sometimes we get this idea that to be a prophetic voice, we have to be some sort of like radical statement about what we're going to do. And we're not going to go live in community in the hills of Golden Ears or something like that. But we can be these small moments of prophetic voices within the system and from within our culture. And that's what Huldah is. Even within Josiah's understanding of the world, he's going into Assyria as a political statement on behalf of God. That's kind of a big deal. But we can do small deals within our own space. It looks like responding to family differently. It looks like responding to people that we come in contact differently. It is small things that are fully immersed in our culture and in our community. You know that the book I've been reading along with this has been Walter Brueggemann's, what is that titled? I don't remember. Come to me afterward. And Brueggemann presents this like really bold, crazy kind of idea about what the prophet is supposed to be today. And it's almost too big. It's almost daunting and too challenging. But at the end of his book, he has these few pages, and he says, this is where I see the prophetic voice working out in the lives of people around me. And he names a mission. He names somebody, a group that cares for people on the streets and provides food in their community. He names a church that regularly reaches out with help to their homeless population. He names these very normal, everyday places and calls them out in their spectacular prophetic voice. The reality is this doesn't have to be a huge, monumentous undertaking. I'm going to go be a prophetic voice in my community. It is small moments where we change the interactions with those around us to reach a different kind of people. These Davidic expectations of kingdom continue all the way into the New Testament. And when we get to Jesus, you know my favorite story, maybe my favorite in the whole Bible, is on the road to Emmaus. Jesus has died, and he's then walking along with these two guys, and they tell him, haven't you heard what's going on? And they follow that with, we thought this was the person to restore the kingdom. We thought this was the guy. Because they were looking for that Davidic king that is going to restore Israel, that is going to restore the kingdom, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a reality sense. So in that place, we miss what's really going on around us. And these two guys missed what was really going on around them, which was this prophetic voice telling them to rethink in those small, everyday ways, how does your faith function? How does your faith work? I love the concept that we can't change how people see church until we respond differently to them. There is an expectation within our culture, within our church culture, on how we respond to the outside world. And that doesn't change until we respond differently to them. So we work on that every day here in how we live out our faith in a public setting so that people see us to see Christians differently. That's the prophetic voice that we're talking about. That's that glimpse of Huldah, a woman in a patriarchal society that has no business being there, yet everyone knows who she is and that she is the one they need to talk to and know and understand and hear from. Small changes make a big difference in how the world responds to our faith.